The wounded stranger. The forest had teeth tonight. Mara Colton knew this in her bones as she trudged through the darkening pine woods of Timber Ridge, Montana, her breath forming ghostly clouds in the October air. Most people would have turned back an hour ago, but Mara wasn't most people. She'd grown up in these mountains, learned their moods the way other children learned multiplication tables. Still, something felt different tonight. A heaviness pressing against her chest, making each step feel like a question she wasn't sure she wanted answered. The wolf appeared between two aspens so suddenly that Mara's heart stuttered. It lay in a hollow, dark fur matted with blood, one massive paw twisted at an angle that made her veterinary training scream in alarm. But it was the eyes that stopped her cold, amber and disturbingly intelligent, tracking her movements with an awareness that separated predator from prey. Wolves didn't look at humans like this, like they were memorizing your face, like they were deciding whether to trust you. "Easy," Mara whispered, though whether she was calming the animal or herself, she couldn't say. The wolf's lip curled, revealing teeth designed for tearing, but the growl that followed was weak, desperate. Mara had seen that look before in the animals she treated at her clinic, the moment when survival instinct gave way to something like hope. She should call Fish and Wildlife. She should absolutely not approach a wild wolf alone in the woods with darkness falling like a curtain. She knelt beside it anyway. "This is going to hurt," she murmured, shrugging off her jacket despite the cold. The wolf watched her with those unsettling eyes as she examined the leg, caught in an illegal trap, the steel jaws cruel and efficient. Her fingers worked quickly, feeling for the release mechanism while her mind catalogued injuries. Possible fracture, definite tissue damage, blood loss that painted the fallen leaves crimson. The trap sprang open with a metallic snap that echoed through the forest. The wolf's body went rigid, a whine escaping its throat that sounded almost human in its anguish. Mara worked fast, wrapping the leg in her jacket, her hands steady despite the voice in her head screaming that she was insane. When she finished, the wolf's breathing had steadied, but it hadn't moved, just kept watching her with those amber eyes that seemed to hold entire conversations she couldn't quite hear. "You need antibiotics," she said quietly. "And probably surgery. Can you walk?" The absurdity of asking a wolf question struck her, but then the creature did something that turned her blood to ice water. It nodded. Just once. Deliberately. A gesture so human that Mara rocked back on her heels, her scientific mind colliding with something ancient and impossible. The wolf struggled to its feet, favoring the injured leg, and looked at her expectantly. "Waiting. This is crazy," Mara breathed. But she stood anyway, and together, woman and wolf, they began the long walk back through the darkening forest, neither of them knowing that everything was about to change. What happens when Mara discovers the truth about her mysterious patient? Will her act of mercy save her, or destroy everything she knows? Don't miss Chapter 2, where secrets begin to unravel and dangerous forces close in. Sanctuary. Mara's clinic sat on the edge of Timber Ridge like a promise, a converted barn with good bones and better intentions. She'd bought it 3 years ago with her divorce settlement, transforming heartbreak into purpose one renovation at a time. Now, as she helped the massive wolf through the back entrance, she was grateful for the isolation, grateful that her nearest neighbor was half a mile down a dirt road and that she'd never gotten around to hiring the assistant she probably needed. Some secrets required solitude. The wolf collapsed on the examination table with a grace that seemed wrong for an animal in pain. Mara locked the door, an instinct she didn't question, and turned to face her patient under the harsh fluorescent lights. In the clinic's sterile brightness, the creature looked even more impossible. Too large, too aware, too present in a way that made her skin prickle with recognition she couldn't name. "Okay," she said, pulling on gloves with hands that trembled only slightly. "Let's see what we're dealing with." She worked in silence, cleaning the wound with careful precision while the wolf remained perfectly still. No sedation needed, no restraints, just that unnerving cooperation that went beyond training or instinct. The trap had done significant damage, tearing through muscle and scraping bone, but somehow nothing was broken. Mara had seen plenty of trap injuries in her years practicing veterinary medicine. They were never this clean, never this calculated. "Someone wanted you caught," she murmured, threading a suture, "but not killed." Why? The wolf's amber eyes tracked her movements, and Mara could have sworn she saw frustration flicker across its face. Impossible. Yet there it was, an expression too complex for animal features, like watching someone struggle with words they couldn't speak. She was losing her mind. That was the only explanation. The clinic door rattled suddenly, and Mara's heart lurched into her throat. Through the frosted glass, she could make out two silhouettes, broad-shouldered, deliberate in their movements. The wolf's entire body went rigid, a warning rumble building in its chest that sounded like distant thunder. "Dr. Colton?" A man's voice, smooth as river stone. "We're looking for a dangerous animal. Wounded wolf, probably headed this direction." Mara's hand stilled on the wolf's flank. She should open that door, should tell them exactly what she'd found, and let the professionals handle this impossible situation. Instead, she found herself looking into those amber eyes, seeing something that logic couldn't explain but instinct recognized. A plea, raw and desperate. "Trust me," those eyes seemed to say. "Please. Haven't seen anything," Mara called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I'll keep an eye out." The shadows lingered, and she could feel their doubt pressing against the door like a physical weight. Then, after an eternity compressed into 30 seconds, footsteps retreated. An engine started. Gravel crunched beneath tires, fading into the distance. The wolf's body relaxed incrementally, but its eyes never left hers, now holding something that looked disturbingly like gratitude. Mara resumed suturing with hands that shook for entirely different reasons, her mind spinning through a dozen rational explanations and finding none that fit. "I just lied to what I'm guessing were wildlife officers," she said quietly. "For a wolf who understands English and makes decisions like a person." She tied off the final suture and met that amber gaze directly. "So here's the deal. You're going to stay here tonight while those antibiotics do their work. And tomorrow you're going to give me some answers, because I don't know what you are, but you're not just a wolf." The creature's head tilted, and impossibly, its expression shifted into something that might have been amusement. Then it did something even more impossible. It began to change. Mara stumbled backward, her hip slamming into the counter as the wolf's form rippled like water disturbed by stones. Fur receded into skin, bone restructured with sounds that shouldn't exist, and where an animal had been, a man now lay on her examination table, naked, scarred, and looking at her with eyes that remained the same devastating amber. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with disuse and pain. "For saving my life, Mara Colton. And I'm sorry." "Sorry?" The word came out strangled. "Sorry for what?" His smile was gentle and devastating. "For making you a target." "They'll come back, and when they do, they won't be looking for a wolf anymore." The world tilted sideways, and Mara gripped the counter for balance, staring at the impossible man on her table while every certainty she'd ever held about reality shattered like glass. Who is this mysterious stranger, and what danger has Mara invited into her life? Chapter 3 reveals shocking truths about hidden worlds and impossible choices. The Alpha's truth. His name was Kieran Blackwood, and he was dying. Not from the trap wound Mara's sutures were holding, but from something darker that she could see now in the harsh clinic lights. Silver veins traced beneath his skin like poison rivers, spreading from old scars that crisscrossed his torso in a map of violence. She'd grabbed a blanket to cover him with trembling hands, but her clinical eye couldn't unsee what those marks meant. Torture. Methodical and prolonged. "Silver," Kieran said, following her gaze. His voice carried the weight of Montana mountains, ancient and unyielding. "It's toxic to my kind. The trap was lined with it, and I've been compromised for weeks before that." Mara's mind spun like a compass without true north. Werewolves, shapeshifters, creatures from bedtime stories designed to make children fear the dark. Except one was bleeding on her examination table, making the impossible mundane through sheer presence. "Your kind," she repeated hollowly. "And what exactly is your kind?" "We call ourselves the Changed. We've lived alongside humans in these mountains for centuries, hidden in plain sight." Kieran shifted, wincing as the movement pulled his injuries. I was Alpha of the Blackwood Pack, until my brother decided he wanted the position badly enough to commit treason." The word hung between them like smoke. Mara grabbed her rolling stool and sat before her legs gave out, her veterinary training wrestling with supernatural reality. "Your brother did this?" "The trap?" "Traps. Plural." Kieran's laugh was bitter as burnt coffee. "He's been hunting me for 3 weeks, using silver and hired trackers." "Those men at your door? His people, not wildlife officers." Marcus always was good at deception. His amber eyes found hers, and Mara felt the impact like a physical touch. "Your pack law is simple. Kill the Alpha, take his place. But it only works if you kill him in fair combat. What Marcus is doing, it's forbidden. It will start a war." "So why are you here?" Mara heard herself ask. "Why come to Timber Ridge?" "I didn't plan to." Kieran's voice softened. "I was trying to reach neutral territory, get word to the High Council about Marcus's betrayal. But the trap..." He gestured to his bandaged leg. "I would have died there if you hadn't found me. And now you're involved, whether either of us wanted it." The clinic felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in with the weight of knowledge Mara hadn't asked for. Outside, Timber Ridge went about its evening routine, families eating dinner, dogs barking, the normal world continuing in blissful ignorance. She could feel that normalcy slipping away like water through her fingers. "The men who came here," she said slowly. "They'll figure out I lied." "Yes." Kieran's honesty was almost cruel in its directness. "Marcus knows how to track me. He'll realize you helped me, and he'll come back." He struggled to sit up. his face graying with pain. "Which is why I need to leave before—" "Stop." Mara stood, her decision crystallizing with the clarity that came from too many years of patching up broken things. "You can barely stand. You've got silver poisoning spreading through your system, and from what I can see, you haven't eaten properly in days." She crossed her arms, channeling every bit of stubbornness her ex-husband used to complain about. "You're not going anywhere tonight." Kieran stared at her like she'd sprouted antlers. "You don't understand what you're offering. Marcus won't hesitate to hurt you to get to me. He's already killed 3 pack members who questioned his methods. You're human. You're fragile in ways you can't imagine." "I'm a veterinarian who lives alone on 20 acres of Montana wilderness," Mara shot back. "I've handled aggressive dogs, kicked out an abusive husband, and rebuilt my entire life from scratch. I'm not as fragile as you think." She met his gaze steadily, ignoring the way her pulse hammered. "Besides, you saved my life tonight." "I did?" "You warned me about those men. That growl. You knew they were dangerous." Mara surprised herself with a small smile. "Fair's fair. Now lie back down before you pull your stitches and tell me what I need to know about silver poisoning." For a long moment, Kieran simply looked at her, something shifting in those amber eyes that made her breath catch. Then, impossibly, he smiled back, a real smile that transformed his scarred face into something beautiful and devastating. "You're extraordinary, Mara Colton," he said quietly. "I'm insane," she corrected. "Now talk. How do we counteract silver in your system?" As Kieran began explaining the intricate biology of his kind, Mara listened with the focused intensity she'd learned in veterinary school, her mind cataloging information while her heart whispered warnings she refused to hear. Outside, the Montana night deepened, and somewhere in those dark woods, a false alpha plotted murder. But in this moment, in the warm sanctuary of her clinic, Mara chose to believe that saving one impossible life might be enough to change everything. As Mara and Kieran race against time to heal his wounds, dangerous forces circle closer. Chapter 4 brings unexpected allies, shocking betrayals, and a connection neither of them saw coming. Moonlight and medicine. Mara's farmhouse had never felt so small. She'd managed to get Kieran inside under cover of darkness, supporting half his weight while he limped on his bandaged leg. Now he sat at her kitchen table wrapped in her dead father's bathrobe, looking simultaneously dangerous and domestic in a way that scrambled her thoughts. The silver poisoning had worsened, those dark veins creeping further up his arms, but his color was better after the soup she'd forced down his throat. "Your bedside manner is aggressive," Kieran observed, watching her crush herbs with a mortar and pestle. "My patients usually can't complain." Mara added wolfsbane to the mixture, ironically named given the circumstances, along with milk thistle and activated charcoal. If his biology worked anything like the poisoning cases she'd treated in animals, this might help. "Drink this. It tastes like hell, but it should help bind some of the silver in your bloodstream." Kieran accepted the cup without argument, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The contact lasted half a second, but Mara felt it like an electric current, sharp and illuminating. His eyes widened fractionally, and she knew he'd felt it too, this impossible pull that defied every rational thought in her head. "Why did you really stay?" he asked, after draining the cup with barely a grimace. "You could have called those men back, turned me over and gone back to your normal life." Mara was saved from answering by a knock at the door. 3 sharp raps that made Kieran's entire body tense. She saw the shift ripple through him, human form struggling against the wolf that lived beneath his skin. In the overhead light, his eyes flashed amber. "Back door," she whispered. "Now." But Kieran shook his head, his hand catching her wrist with surprising gentleness. "Too late. I can smell them. 3 of Marcus's trackers. If I run, they'll know you're hiding something." His voice dropped lower, urgent. "Do you trust me?" "That's a complicated question," Mara breathed. "Do you?" Kieran pulled her closer, his other hand coming up to cup her face. "Because I need you to kiss me. Right now." The knock came again, harder this time. Mara's heart hammered against her ribs, but she found herself nodding, some instinct overriding logic. Kieran's lips met hers the moment she heard the front door open, unlocked, like every other door in Timber Ridge, where neighbors trusted neighbors and strangers were rare as snow in July. The kiss started as deception, a tableau for unexpected visitors. But something ignited between them. That electric pull amplifying into something that stole Mara's breath and rewrote her understanding of connection. Kieran kissed like a drowning man tasting air, desperate and reverent, and Mara responded with an honesty that terrified her. "Well," a woman's voice, sharp as broken glass. "Looks like the doctor's been busy." Mara pulled back, her face burning, to find 3 people in her kitchen. The woman who'd spoken was tall and angular, with ice-blonde hair and eyes that catalogued everything. Behind her stood 2 men, one built like a linebacker, the other lean and watchful as a coyote. "Can I help you?" Mara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Because breaking into someone's home is generally frowned upon, even in Montana." The blonde smiled without warmth. "Interesting accent." "Not local, are you?" Her gaze slid to Kieran, lingering on the bathrobe and bandaged leg. "And who's your injured friend?" "Boyfriend," Kieran said smoothly, his arm sliding around Mara's waist in a gesture that felt shockingly natural. "Hiking accident. Mara was just patching me up." He offered an easy smile that Mara wouldn't have thought him capable of. "I'm River." River Thompson. The name was terrible, obviously false, but delivered with such confidence that the blonde's eyes narrowed. "We're looking for a dangerous animal. Large wolf, probably wounded. Your girlfriend here told my associates she hadn't seen anything." "Because I haven't," Mara said firmly. "Now, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave. We're kind of in the middle of something." The linebacker's nostrils flared, and Mara saw something predatory flash across his face. Not human, she realized with a jolt. These weren't hired trackers. They were changed, like Kieran, pack members hunting their own alpha. "You smell wrong," the lean one said suddenly, addressing Kieran. "Like medicine and—" He inhaled deeper. "Silver." The temperature in the kitchen dropped 10 degrees. Kieran's arm tightened around Mara's waist, and she felt the tension coiling through his body like a spring about to snap. The blonde took a step forward, and Mara saw the flash of something metallic in her hand, a knife with a silver blade. "Clever," the blonde purred. "Hiding in plain sight with a human shield. But you're weaker than I thought, Alpha. Marcus will be disappointed." Everything happened at once. Kieran shoved Mara behind him as the blonde lunged, but his injured leg buckled. The linebacker charged from the left, while the lean tracker circled right, and Mara watched in horror as Kieran shifted, partial transformation, his face elongating, claws erupting from his fingers. He caught the blonde's knife hand with inhuman speed, twisting until she dropped the weapon with a shriek. But there were 3 of them, and 1 of him, weakened by silver and injury. Mara didn't think. She grabbed her father's cast-iron skillet from the stove, heavy as justice and twice as unforgiving, and swung it into the linebacker's skull with every ounce of strength she possessed. He dropped like a felled tree, and the sharp crack of impact echoed through her kitchen. The lean tracker froze, staring at his unconscious companion. "Get out!" Mara heard herself say, the skillet still raised. "Now, before I call the sheriff and explain how I found 3 people breaking into my home and threatening me." The blonde clutched her twisted wrist, hatred burning in her eyes. "This isn't over." "It never is," Kieran growled, his voice distorted by his partial shift. "Tell Marcus his brother sends his regards, and tell him I'm coming for what he stole." The trackers retreated, dragging their unconscious friend, but the blonde paused at the door. "The council meets in 3 days. Marcus will present evidence of your death and claim the territory, unless you can prove him wrong." Her smile was vicious. "But you won't make it 3 days, not with silver in your veins." Then they were gone, leaving destruction and terrible silence in their wake. Mara lowered the skillet with shaking hands, her kitchen floor scarred with claw marks, her life irrevocably altered. Kieran slumped against the counter, his body reverting to human form as exhaustion claimed him. She caught him before he fell, surprised by her own strength, and felt the tremors running through his frame. 3 days, she whispered. "I know." Kieran's voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry, Mara." "I'm so sorry." But as Mara helped him to her couch, feeling the weight of impossible choices pressing down, she realized with startling clarity that she wasn't sorry at all. Terrified, yes. Confused, absolutely. But not sorry, because for the first time in 3 years, she felt awake. With time running out and enemies closing in, Mara must decide how far she'll go to save the Alpha King. Chapter 5 reveals dangerous alliances and a connection that transcends pack law. The Bond Mara didn't sleep that night. She kept vigil in the armchair across from her couch, where Kieran lay in fitful unconsciousness, his body fighting the silver poison while she watched with clinical detachment that kept crumbling at the edges. Every few hours, she checked his pulse, changed his bandages, and administered more of the herbal mixture that seemed to be slowing the poison's spread, if not reversing it. Dawn came reluctantly through her curtains, painting everything in shades of doubt. "You're staring," Kieran murmured without opening his eyes. "I can feel it." "You stopped breathing twice," Mara replied, her voice rough with exhaustion. "Forgive me for being concerned about my patient." His eyes opened then, still that impossible amber, but clearer than they'd been last night. "I'm not your patient. I'm your mistake." He struggled to sit up, and Mara moved automatically to help him, her hands steadying his shoulders. "You should have let them take me." Would have been simpler. "I don't do simple." Mara met his gaze directly. "And I don't abandon patients, even impossible ones who can turn into wolves and have brothers trying to murder them." Something shifted in Kieran's expression. Vulnerability breaking through the Alpha's armor. "Why? The question was barely a whisper. "You don't know me. You owe me nothing, yet you keep risking everything." Mara wanted to say it was her veterinary oath, or basic human decency, or any of a dozen rational reasons. But sitting here in the gray morning light, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her palms, and seeing the weight he carried in those ancient eyes, she couldn't lie. "Because when I look at you," she said slowly, "I see someone who's been alone too long, who's carried too much and trusted too little, and I recognize that because I've been there." She pulled back, suddenly self-conscious. "After my divorce, I was so broken I wasn't sure I'd ever feel whole again. But I rebuilt. One day, one choice, one act of stubborn survival at a time." She managed a tired smile. "Helping you feels like continuing that pattern." Kieran was silent for a long moment, studying her face like he was memorizing every detail. "You're remarkable," he finally said. "And you deserve better than being dragged into pack politics and blood feuds." "Probably," Mara agreed, "but we don't always get what we deserve. Sometimes we get what we need instead." The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither seemed ready to examine. Then Kieran's expression shifted, becoming urgent. "The council meeting is in 2 days. If I can get there, present myself alive, Marcus's claim fails. But it's 100 miles through territory he controls, and I'm—" He gestured to his bandaged leg and the silver veins still visible beneath his skin. "Not exactly in fighting condition." "Then we get you in fighting condition." Mara stood, her decision made with the same stubborn clarity that had guided her through veterinary school and divorce proceedings. "I have a friend, another vet, practices in Whitefish. She's always going on about holistic treatments and alternative medicine. If anyone knows how to accelerate healing, it's Sarah." She pulled out her phone. "And I'm driving you to that council meeting." "Mara, don't." She turned to face him, seeing the protest forming. "You said Marcus killed pack members who questioned him. That means he's dangerous to everyone, not just you. You might be willing to die for pack law, but I'm not willing to let him win because of some misplaced nobility." Kieran rose slowly, testing his injured leg, and crossed to where she stood. Up close, Mara could see the exhaustion written in every line of his face, the pain he carried like a second skin. But she could also see something else, a fierce determination that matched her own. "If we do this," he said quietly, "if you help me reach the council, there's something you need to understand." His hand came up, fingertips barely touching her cheek in a gesture that sent electricity racing down her spine. "The bond between us, what you felt when we kissed, it's not just attraction. My kind, we have soulmates, fated mates. And when we find them, there's a recognition that goes beyond logic or choice." Mara's breath caught. "You're saying—" "I'm saying I felt it the moment you knelt beside me in the forest. This pull, this knowing." Kieran's voice was raw with honesty. "I don't expect anything from you. You're human. You have your own life, and gods know you deserve someone without a target on their back. But you should know the truth before you make this choice." The kitchen felt suspended in amber, this moment crystallizing into something Mara knew she'd remember forever. She thought of her safe life, her quiet clinic, the carefully constructed walls she'd built around her heart after David left. All of it suddenly seemed small compared to the impossibility standing before her. "This is insane," she whispered. Completely, Kieran agreed. I barely know you. True. Werewolves aren't supposed to exist. Yet here I am. Mara laughed, a surprised sound that turned into something dangerously close to tears. I should be running. Any sane person would be running. Kieran's hand fell away, and she saw him steeling himself for rejection. I wouldn't blame you. Instead, Mara closed the distance between them and kissed him. Deliberate this time, not for show or survival, but because something in her recognized something in him. The kiss was softer than last night's desperation, but it burned just as bright, igniting that impossible bond into something that felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, Kieran was staring at her with wonder and disbelief. Okay, Mara said, her voice steady despite the way her world was tilting. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to call Sarah, get you properly healed, and drive to this council meeting. You're going to reclaim your position as Alpha, expose your brother for the murderer he is, and restore order to your pack. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. And then we're going to figure out what this bond means because I'm not running. Not from you, not from this, not anymore. Mara, I spent 3 years playing it safe, she continued, building walls and avoiding anything that might hurt me again. And you know what? I was surviving, but I wasn't living. She squeezed his hand. Maybe this is crazy. Maybe I'll regret it. But I'd rather take a chance on something real than spend another year wondering what if. Kieran pulled her into an embrace that felt like shelter and promise combined, his lips pressed against her hair. You're going to be the death of me, he murmured. Not if I can help it, Mara replied. Now sit down before you fall down and let me make breakfast. We have a lot of work to do and less than 48 hours to do it. As she moved around her kitchen, making coffee and planning impossible journeys, Mara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Dangerous, reckless, absolutely insane hope that maybe, just maybe, saving a wolf in the woods was the beginning of saving herself too. The race against time begins as Mara and Kieran prepare for the journey that will determine not just his fate, but the future of 2 worlds. Chapter 6 brings everything to a stunning conclusion. The Council of Wolves. The drive to Glacier Point took 4 hours through Montana wilderness that seemed to hold its breath. Sarah had come through. Her combination of conventional medicine and indigenous healing practices had accelerated Kieran's recovery in ways that defied Mara's medical training. The silver veins had faded, the leg wound had knitted to scar tissue, and while Kieran still moved with careful precision, he was no longer on the edge of collapse. Mara drove her truck through mountain passes and pine forests, hyper-aware of Kieran beside her, his presence filling the cab like a promise. You're nervous, he observed as they climbed toward the meeting place. I'm terrified, Mara corrected. I'm about to meet a council of werewolves and potentially watch you fight your brother to the death. Nervous doesn't quite cover it. Kieran's hand found hers on the gearshift. You don't have to come inside. You've done more than... Don't finish that sentence. Mara's grip tightened. We've been over this. I'm seeing this through. The council grounds materialized from the forest like something from a fever dream. Ancient stone structures built into the mountainside, hidden from human eyes by geography and tradition. As Mara parked, she could see figures gathering, dozens of them, all watching with the intense focus of predators assessing potential prey. Stay close, Kieran murmured, helping her from the truck. "And whatever happens, remember, you're under my protection. Council law forbids harming a visiting human. That's only mildly reassuring." They walked through the gathering crowd, and Mara felt the weight of dozens of gazes tracking their movement. The changed came in all forms, young and old, built like warriors or slight as dancers. But they all shared that same otherworldly awareness, that sense of existing on a frequency just beyond human perception. Then the crowd parted, and Mara saw him. Marcus Blackwood could have been Kieran's twin, same height, same angular features, but where Kieran carried his authority like a burden, Marcus wore it like a crown. His smile was sharp as he approached, flanked by trackers, including the blonde woman from Mara's kitchen. "Brother," Marcus said, his voice carrying false warmth. "What a surprise. We'd all assumed you were dead, given the evidence." "Evidence can be manufactured," Kieran replied calmly. "Bodies can be falsified. But here I stand, Marcus, alive, aware of your treachery, and ready to challenge your claim before the council." Murmurs rippled through the gathering. An elderly woman stepped forward, ancient eyes in a weathered face, and Mara instinctively knew this was the council elder, the one who decided pack law. "Kieran Blackwood," the elder's voice carried the weight of centuries. "You were declared dead after credible witnesses reported your demise. Your brother followed proper protocol in claiming leadership. What evidence do you present to contradict these facts?" "I present myself," Kieran said. "Alive despite 3 weeks of systematic hunting using illegal methods. Silver traps, hired human mercenaries, ambushes in neutral territory. All violations of pack law, all orchestrated by Marcus in his attempt to murder his way to power." "Lies," Marcus snarled, but Mara saw the calculation in his eyes. "You've always been jealous of my capabilities. Then let's settle this the traditional way." Kieran's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Trial by combat. If I'm lying, you'll defeat me easily. If I speak truth, the stronger alpha will prevail." The crowd erupted in excited whispers. Marcus's face went through several expressions before settling on cold acceptance. "Gladly. I'll enjoy finishing what I started." As the council began preparing the combat circle, Kieran turned to Mara. His hands cupped her face with devastating gentleness. "Whatever happens, you're going to win," Mara said fiercely. "You're stronger than him, smarter than him, and you're fighting for something he'll never understand." "What's that?" "Honor, truth, the people who depend on you." She pulled him down, kissing him with everything she couldn't say. "And maybe, just a little bit, for me." Kieran's smile was brilliant and heartbreaking. "More than a little bit." The combat was brutal and beautiful and terrible to witness. Mara stood at the circle's edge, flanked by Sarah, who'd arrived separately, watching as Kieran and Marcus tore into each other with the savage grace of apex predators. They shifted between human and wolf forms, using claws and teeth and raw strength in a dance as old as the mountains. Blood stained the stone circle, and Mara's medical training catalogued injuries with detached horror. Marcus was vicious, fighting with the desperate cruelty of someone who knew he'd already lost everything but the fight itself. But Kieran was relentless, every movement purposeful, conserving strength while Marcus exhausted himself with rage. The end came suddenly. Marcus lunged, overextending, and Kieran caught him mid-shift, one hand locked around his brother's throat, claws positioned over his jugular. The entire gathering went silent, watching to see if Kieran would deliver the killing blow that tradition allowed. "Yield," Kieran growled, his voice distorted by partial transformation. Marcus struggled, hatred burning in eyes so similar to Kieran's, yet utterly different. "Never." "Then you die knowing you failed." Kieran's voice dropped lower. "Or you yield, accept exile, and live with the knowledge that mercy was stronger than your cruelty." For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Marcus spoke the word that ended it. "Yield." Kieran released him, stepping back as Marcus collapsed to his knees, defeated but alive. The elder moved forward, her ancient voice carrying across the silent gathering. "The challenge is decided." Kieran Blackwood retains his position as Alpha. Marcus Blackwood is hereby stripped of pack rights and exiled from all changed territories. Her gaze swept the crowd. "Let it be known, treachery against one's Alpha is treachery against us all. This ruling is final." Mara watched as Marcus was escorted away by council guards, his reign of terror ending not with violence, but with the weight of justice. Then Kieran was moving toward her, still bleeding from a dozen wounds, and she met him halfway with Sarah's medical kit already in hand. "You're hurt," she said, her voice unsteady. "I'm alive." Kieran pulled her close despite the blood and the watching eyes. "Because of you." The celebration that followed blurred into sensory overload, pack members approaching to reaffirm their loyalty, the elder blessing Kieran's continued leadership, and through it all, Mara remained at his side. Not as an outsider or a curiosity, but as something the changed recognized even if she was still coming to terms with it herself. His mate. His chosen. His impossible salvation. New beginnings. 3 months later, Mara's clinic had expanded. The new wing wasn't advertised on any website or mentioned to the town's human residents, but word had spread through the changed community. There was a veterinarian in Timber Ridge who understood their unique needs, who could treat injuries that straddled the line between human and animal, and who asked no questions beyond what was medically necessary. Kieran had tried to argue against it at first, worried about the danger of exposure. But Mara had simply given him that stubborn look he'd come to adore and informed him that if she was going to be mated to the Alpha King, she might as well be useful. Now, as she stitched up a young wolf who'd gotten overzealous during training exercises, she felt Kieran's presence before he spoke, that bond between them humming like a tuning fork. "You're smiling," he observed, leaning in the doorway of her examination room. "I'm happy," Mara replied simply, tying off the final suture. "Is that allowed?" "More than allowed." Kieran crossed to her, pulling her into an embrace that still felt like coming home even after 3 months of practice. "Mandatory, actually. It's an Alpha decree." Mara laughed against his chest, breathing in the scent of pine and wolf, and the man who'd turned her carefully reconstructed life into beautiful chaos. Outside, Montana winter was settling in with the kind of cold that reminded you that nature could kill as easily as nurture. But here, in her clinic with Kieran's arms around her, and a young wolf already healing on her table, Mara felt warmer than she had in years. "I was thinking," Kieran murmured against her hair, "about what you said that first morning, about deserving better than being dragged into pack politics." "I remember." Mara pulled back to look at him. "I also remember saying we get what we need instead of what we deserve." Still, his amber eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I want to give you everything, Mara. Not just survival or protection, but joy. partnership, a life that's ours together, not just mine that you're accommodating. Mara cupped his scarred face, seeing past the Alpha King to the man who'd looked at her with desperate hope in the forest, who'd trusted her with truths that could have gotten them both killed, who'd chosen mercy over vengeance and love over tradition. "You already give me that," she said softly. "Every day, every choice we make together." She smiled. "Besides, I like our life." It's never boring. As if summoned by her words, the clinic door burst open and Sarah rushed in, her expression somewhere between excitement and exasperation. "Mara!" "We've got an emergency." Grizzly shifter with a dislocated shoulder, 3 teenage wolves who thought wrestling a moose was a good idea, and apparently the council elder wants to discuss establishing a formal medical network across all changed territories. She paused, taking in the embrace. "But if you're busy—" "I'm never too busy for this kind of chaos," Mara replied, already moving toward her medical supplies. She glanced back at Kieran, seeing the pride and love written across his face. "Welcome to my world, Alpha King. Think you can keep up?" Kieran's smile was bright as summer. "For you?" "Always." And as Mara dove into the beautiful chaos of treating impossible patients and building bridges between worlds, she thought about that night in the forest, how one act of unexpected mercy had led to this, a life richer and stranger and more genuine than anything she'd planned. She'd saved a wolf in the woods, not knowing he was the Alpha King in hiding. But he'd saved her right back, from loneliness, from the safety of never risking her heart again, from a life half-lived in the shadows of past hurts. Some endings, Mara had learned, were really just beginnings in disguise, and some wolves were worth following into the unknown. The end. Thank you for reading. If you enjoyed Mara and Kieran's story, imagine what other secrets lurk in the forests of Timber Ridge, where the line between human and wild has always been thinner than most dare to believe.